The moment Eliza Montgomery whispered those words, "I've liked you since the day we met," everything I thought I knew about loyalty, grief, and second chances shattered around me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You might be wondering how a struggling single father ended up in the bedroom of his dead boss's widow at what was supposed to be a memorial gathering. And why, despite every alarm bell ringing in my head, I couldn't bring myself to walk away. The truth is, sometimes the people we think we know best are hiding the darkest secrets, and by the end of that night, I would discover just how deep those secrets went. My name is Daniel Hayes, and 6 months ago, my life was defined by two things: raising my 8-year-old daughter Lily after my wife abandoned us, and working 60-hour weeks for Richard Montgomery, the most respected, and feared, publishing executive in New York. What happened at that party would change everything, but not for the reasons you might expect. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, elegant cream cardstock with silver embossing. A celebration of life, it read, though Richard had been dead for nearly a year. I almost threw it away. After all, Richard and I weren't friends. He was the demanding boss who'd made my professional life hell for 3 years while I edited manuscripts for his prestigious publishing house. But something about the handwritten note at the bottom in delicate script stopped me. "Daniel, your presence would mean more than you know. Please come. Eliza." I hadn't seen Eliza Montgomery since the funeral, where she'd stood like a porcelain statue, accepting condolences with practiced grace, her long platinum hair cascading down the back of her black dress. I remembered thinking she looked more like Richard's trophy than his partner. 20 years his junior, with the kind of ethereal beauty that seemed almost unreal. We'd barely spoken more than pleasantries in the 3 years I'd worked for her husband. So why was she personally requesting my attendance? "Daddy, is this about Mr. Montgomery?" Lily asked, peering over my shoulder at the invitation. Her small face scrunched with the seriousness only children can muster when discussing death. "The man who made you work on my birthday?" I winced. Richard had indeed called me in for an emergency manuscript review on Lily's birthday last year, resulting in me missing half of her party. It was one of many moments that had made me question whether the prestigious job was worth the sacrifice. "Yes, sweetheart. His wife is having a party to remember him. Are you going to go?" Her blue eyes, so like her mother's, studied me with that unnerving perceptiveness children sometimes have. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I should probably stay home with you. Mrs. Winters said she could babysit any time," Lily offered, referring to our elderly neighbor who adored her. "And you never go anywhere, Daddy." Out of the mouths of babes. She was right. Since becoming a single parent, my social life had dwindled to parent-teacher conferences and the occasional coffee with my sister when she visited from Boston. Maybe an evening out, even one spent commemorating my difficult former boss, wouldn't be the worst thing. Little did I know that decision would lead me to uncover the truth about Richard's death, a truth that someone at that party would kill to keep hidden. The Montgomery estate sprawled across 3 acres in the wealthiest part of Westchester County, a monument to old money and privilege. As my rideshare pulled through the wrought iron gates, I felt distinctly out of place in my one good suit, the same one I'd worn to Richard's funeral. Guests milled about the manicured lawn, champagne flutes glinting in the early evening light. I recognized several faces from the publishing world, authors Richard had championed, executives he'd partnered with, rivals he'd crushed. "Daniel. You came." The voice behind me was warm honey, and I turned to find Eliza Montgomery approaching, radiant in a simple white dress that contrasted dramatically with her alabaster skin. Her silver blonde hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. Up close, her beauty was even more striking: high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of storm clouds. "Mrs. Montgomery," I managed, extending my hand formally. "Thank you for the invitation." "Please, it's Eliza," she said, ignoring my hand and leaning in to kiss my cheek. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and subtle, lingered as she pulled away. "And thank you for coming." I wasn't sure you would. There was something in her gaze I couldn't quite read, vulnerability, perhaps, or something deeper. Before I could respond, she was pulled away by other guests, leaving me with a strange sense of anticipation. I made my way through the crowd, accepting condolences from people who assumed I'd been close to Richard, nodding at acquaintances from the publishing house. The atmosphere was oddly festive for a memorial, with waiters circulating trays of hors d'oeuvres and an open bar serving top-shelf liquor. Richard would have approved, he'd always believed in excess. Hayes, didn't expect to see you here. James Whitman, Richard's second-in-command and my current boss, appeared at my elbow with a tumbler of whiskey. His tone suggested I was an unwelcome surprise. Eliza invited me personally, I said, immediately wondering why I felt the need to justify my presence. Whitman's eyes narrowed slightly. Did she now? Interesting. He took a slow sip of his drink. You know, Richard always had a soft spot for you, despite your differences. Said you had integrity. Rare quality in our business. This was news to me. Richard had never shown anything but demanding impatience in our interactions. He had an unusual way of showing appreciation. Whitman laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. That's putting it mildly. Richard was a complicated man with complicated relationships. His gaze drifted to Eliza, who was chatting with an elderly couple across the room. Very complicated. Before I could ask what he meant, Whitman was called away by another colleague. I found myself alone again, nursing a glass of expensive scotch I didn't particularly want, wondering why I'd come. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the immaculate lawn, when I felt a light touch on my arm. Would you mind helping me with something? Eliza asked, her voice low. In Richard's study. It won't take long. I followed her through the crowded living room, past a grand piano where someone was playing a melancholy Chopin piece, and down a hallway lined with framed photographs of Richard's life. Richard accepting awards, Richard on yachts with celebrities, Richard and Eliza on their wedding day. She looked impossibly young in that photo, barely out of college, while Richard, already in his 40s, beamed with the satisfaction of a man who'd acquired a valuable asset. Eliza opened a heavy oak door and gestured me inside. Richard's study was exactly as I remembered it from the few times I'd been summoned there. Leather-bound books lining the walls, a massive mahogany desk dominating the space, and the lingering scent of expensive cigars. What I didn't expect was for Eliza to close the door behind us, turn the lock with a soft click, and lean against it, her eyes never leaving mine. I didn't ask you here to help me with anything, she said quietly. I needed to speak with you privately. My pulse quickened. About what? She moved toward me with a grace that seemed almost choreographed, stopping only when she was close enough that I could see the faint freckles across her nose, invisible from a distance. About Richard. About what really happened to him. What do you mean? He had a heart attack. The official story, reported in all the papers, Richard Montgomery, publishing magnate, dead at 58 from cardiac arrest in his Manhattan office. Eliza's perfect composure cracked slightly, her lower lip trembling. That's what everyone believes. It's what I let them believe. She took a deep breath. Daniel, I've trusted you since the moment Richard first mentioned you. He said you were the only person at the company with a moral compass that couldn't be bought. He said that? I couldn't hide my surprise. Richard had never given me anything but criticism. He respected you, in his way. Her eyes searched mine. Which is why I need to tell you something I haven't told anyone else. Richard didn't die of natural causes. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying my husband was murdered. Her voice was steady now, resolved. And I think I know who did it. Before she could continue, a sharp knock at the door made us both jump. Eliza's hand flew to her throat. Eliza? Are you in there? A man's voice, impatient and slightly slurred. "People are asking for you." "Just a moment, Charles," she called back, her voice instantly transforming into the perfect hostess. To me, she whispered urgently, "That's Richard's brother. I can't talk now. Meet me in the garden, by the stone bench, at 11. Please, Daniel. I need your help." With that, she smoothed her dress, unlocked the door, and slipped out, leaving me alone in Richard's study with my thoughts spinning. Murder? It seemed impossible. Richard had enemies, certainly. You didn't get to his position without making them, but murder seemed extreme, even in the cutthroat world of publishing. I rejoined the party, but now everything looked different. I studied the guests with new eyes, wondering if I was in a room with a killer. James Whitman was deep in conversation with Richard's lawyer. Charles Montgomery, Richard's younger brother who had always lived in his shadow, was drinking heavily by the fireplace. Several board members from the publishing house clustered near the bar, laughing too loudly. The hours crawled by. I made small talk, declined offers of more drinks, and checked my watch obsessively. At 10:45, I slipped away from the dwindling crowd and made my way to the garden. The night had turned cool, and I wished I'd brought a heavier jacket. The stone bench Eliza had mentioned sat beneath an ancient oak tree, partially hidden from the house by a row of meticulously trimmed hedges. I waited, listening to the distant sounds of the party and the closer chorus of crickets. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I was about to give up when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. But it wasn't Eliza who emerged from the shadows. "I thought I might find you out here," said James Whitman, his silhouette backlit by the lights from the house. "Waiting for our lovely widow?" I stood, instantly on guard. "Just getting some air. Don't insult my intelligence, Hayes." Whitman stepped closer. I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "I saw the way she looked at you. The way she's always looked at you, even when Richard was alive." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, though my heart was racing. "No?" He laughed bitterly. "Richard knew. Why do you think he made your life hell? He suspected there was something between you two." "There was nothing," I began, but Whitman cut me off. "Save it. I don't care about your affair. What I care about is what Eliza might have told you tonight." A chill that had nothing to do with the night air ran through me. "And what might that be?" Whitman stepped even closer, his face now visible in the moonlight. The affable mask he wore at the office was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "About Richard's death. About the manuscript." "What manuscript?" I asked, genuinely confused. Something flickered in Whitman's eyes, relief, perhaps. "So she hasn't told you everything. Good." He straightened his tie, regaining his composure. "Let me give you some friendly advice, Daniel. Go home to your daughter. Forget whatever Eliza Montgomery has told you or promised you. Some stories don't have happy endings." With that cryptic warning, he turned and walked back toward the house, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. I waited another 15 minutes, but Eliza never came. Eventually, the cold drove me back inside, where the party had dwindled to a few lingering guests. There was no sign of Eliza. As I was about to leave, a server handed me a folded note. Inside, in the same elegant handwriting from the invitation, "Not safe to talk here. Come to the boathouse tomorrow, 2 p.m. Trust no one. E." I tucked the note into my pocket, said my goodbyes to the few people I recognized, and called for a ride home. As I waited in the circular driveway, I caught a glimpse of movement at an upstairs window, a silhouette I recognized as Eliza's, watching me leave. She raised her hand in what might have been a wave or a warning, and then disappeared. The ride home was a blur of questions. What had Richard been involved in? Who would want him dead? And why, after nearly a year, was Eliza reaching out to me of all people? Mrs. Winters was asleep on my couch when I got home, the television murmuring softly in the background. I thanked her, saw her to her apartment next door, and checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Looking at her innocent face, I wondered if I should just follow Whitman's advice, forget whatever conspiracy Eliza was suggesting and focus on my daughter, my job, my simple life. But as I lay awake that night, I knew I couldn't. Not just because of my curiosity about Richard's death, but because of the look in Eliza's eyes when she'd said she needed my help. There had been genuine fear there, and something else, something that had stirred feelings in me I thought I'd buried when my wife walked out 3 years ago. The next morning, I called my sister and asked if she could watch Lily for the afternoon. I told her I had a work emergency. Not entirely a lie, since whatever was happening seemed connected to the publishing house. As I drove to the Montgomery estate, following the directions to the boathouse Eliza had included in her note, I tried to prepare myself for what I might learn. The boathouse sat at the edge of a small lake on the property, hidden from the main house by a stand of weeping willows. It was a charming structure, with large windows overlooking the water and a small dock where a rowboat was tied. I parked my car on a service road nearby and approached on foot, as Eliza had instructed. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was cozy and well-appointed, more of a guest house than a storage space for boats. A sitting area with comfortable furniture faced the lake view, and a small kitchenette occupied one corner. But there was no sign of Eliza. "Hello?" I called, moving further into the space. "Eliza?" No answer. I was about to check outside when I noticed something on the coffee table. A thick manila envelope with my name written on it. Next to it sat a leather-bound journal I recognized as similar to the one Richard always carried. I opened the envelope first. Inside was a manuscript, about 300 pages of what appeared to be a memoir. The title page read, "The Price of Power, My Life in Publishing and Politics," by Richard Montgomery. I flipped through it quickly, catching references to bribery, blackmail, and several prominent political figures. This was dynamite. The kind of tell-all that could ruin careers and possibly lead to criminal investigations. The journal contained what looked like Richard's private thoughts, more raw and unfiltered than the manuscript. I had just started reading the first entry when I heard a car approaching outside. Relieved that Eliza had arrived, I moved toward the window. But the black SUV pulling up wasn't Eliza's sleek silver Mercedes. 2 men in dark suits emerged, scanning the area with the practiced efficiency of professionals. One reached inside his jacket in a way that suggested he was checking a weapon. My instincts screamed danger. I grabbed the manuscript and journal, looking frantically for another exit. A back door led to a narrow path along the lake. I slipped out just as I heard the front door open, keeping low and moving quickly toward the cover of the willows. "Check the whole place," a voice ordered behind me. She said he'd be here. She? Had Eliza set me up? Or was someone else involved? I made it to my car without being spotted and drove away as calmly as I could, though my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I needed somewhere safe to read the manuscript, to understand what I'd stumbled into. Not home. I wouldn't risk leading whoever those men were to Lily. Not my office, where Whitman might find me. I ended up in a busy public library in a neighboring town, where I found a quiet corner and began to read. What unfolded in those pages was astonishing, Richard detailing how he'd used his publishing empire to influence elections, launder money for certain political campaigns, and collect compromising information on public figures. Names were named, dates and amounts specified. If published, it would be the scandal of the decade. The journal was even more revealing. In his private thoughts, Richard expressed growing remorse about his activities, hinting at a desire to come clean. The final entry, dated just 2 days before his death, was particularly chilling. He doesn't understand the danger. She thinks publishing this will be my redemption, but they'll never let that happen. If anything happens to me, the manuscript goes to Hayes. He's the only one with nothing to gain and everything to lose. He'll do the right thing. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. Richard hadn't trusted me because of my integrity, he'd chosen me because I was expendable. A struggling single father with no connections, no power. Someone who could be easily silenced if necessary. But who were they? And why had Eliza waited a year to contact me? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Where are you? Are you safe? I hesitated before responding. If Eliza had set me up at the boathouse, replying could lead those men right to me. But if she was in danger too? I have the manuscript, I texted back. Who were those men? The response came immediately, Richard's partners. They know he kept records. Don't trust Whitman. Don't go home. Meet me at the train station, 7 p.m. I checked the time, 4:30. I had hours to kill, and a decision to make. I could walk away, destroy the manuscript, pretend none of this had happened. Or I could meet Eliza and dive deeper into whatever dangerous game Richard had been playing. My phone rang, my sister. Daniel, there's someone here asking about you, she said, her voice tight with worry. A man in a suit. He says it's about work, but Lily's scared of him. I didn't let him in. My blood ran cold. Take Lily and go to Mom's. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I'll explain later. Daniel, what's going on? Please, just do it. I'll call you soon. I hung up, my decision made. These people had brought their threat to my daughter's doorstep. Walking away was no longer an option. At 6:45, I arrived at the train station, the manuscript and journal secure in my backpack. I'd spent the intervening hours reading more of Richard's confessions, piecing together a conspiracy that stretched from publishing into politics, finance, and beyond. Richard had been the middleman, the respectable face that made dirty money clean and bought influence where it was needed. And according to his journal, he'd been planning to expose it all. The station was busy with evening commuters. I scanned the crowds, looking for Eliza's distinctive platinum hair. Instead, I spotted Charles Montgomery, Richard's brother, leaning against a pillar near the ticket machines. Our eyes met, and he straightened, walking purposefully toward me. She's not coming, he said without preamble. Eliza's been taken. Taken? By whom? I demanded, backing away slightly. Charles looked haggard, nothing like the polished man from the party. The same people who killed Richard. The same people who will kill her, and you, if they get what they want. He nodded to my backpack. The manuscript, I presume? How do you know about that? Because I helped Richard write it. Charles ran a hand through his thinning hair. I was his researcher, his confidant. When he decided to come clean about everything, I supported him. Eliza didn't, not at first. She was afraid of what would happen. So Richard wasn't murdered because he was going to publish this? I patted my backpack. No, he was murdered because he was going to testify. The manuscript was insurance, evidence too public to bury if anything happened to him. Charles looked around nervously. We need to move. They'll be watching the stations. Why should I trust you? Because Eliza does. She told me to find you if she didn't make it to the boathouse. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text from Eliza's number. Charles, they're here. Find Daniel. Trust only him. I studied his face, looking for deception. Where is she? I think they've taken her to the city house. It's where they conduct their business. The way he said the word made it clear what kind of business he meant. We need to go to the police. I shook my head. According to this, I tapped my backpack, the police commissioner is involved. We don't know who we can trust. Charles's shoulders slumped. Then what do we do? I thought of Lily, safely on her way to my mother's house in Connecticut. I thought of Eliza's eyes when she told me she needed my help. And I thought of Richard, who despite everything, had trusted me to do the right thing. We save Eliza, I said with more confidence than I felt. And we expose all of it. The Manhattan townhouse was in the Upper East Side, a narrow 4-story building wedged between larger apartments. Charles and I watched from a coffee shop across the street, formulating a plan that seemed increasingly desperate. There will be at least 2 guards, Charles whispered. Professional security. And Whitman will be there, he's the one who took over when Richard died. Whitman? The pieces clicked into place. He's been running the operation all along. Charles nodded grimly. Richard was going to expose him specifically. They were partners for years, but Richard wanted out. Whitman made sure that didn't happen. I thought back to Whitman's warning in the garden. He'd been trying to determine how much I knew, whether I was a threat. How do we get past the security? We don't, Charles said, pulling something from his pocket, a small recorder. But this might. He pressed play, and Richard's voice filled the space between us. James Whitman has been the architect of our political financing operation since 2010. He personally coordinated the payments to Senator Hargrove and Governor Ellis in exchange for the regulatory changes that allowed our acquisition of Midwest Media. Richard recorded everything, Charles explained. This is just a small sample. I've sent copies to every major news outlet with instructions to publish at 9 p.m. tonight if they don't hear from me. I checked my watch, 8:15. So we're on a timer. Yes. And so are they, though they don't know it yet. Our plan was simple, if foolhardy. Charles would approach the front door, claiming to have information about the manuscript. While security was focused on him, would try to find a back entrance. If Eliza was inside, would get her out. If not, I would at least try to find evidence of where they might have taken her. As plans went, it had more holes than a slice of Swiss cheese, but it was all we had. Charles crossed the street, straightening his jacket as he approached the townhouse. I circled the block, finding a service alley that ran behind the row of buildings. A narrow gate led to what appeared to be a small courtyard behind the townhouse. It was locked, but the wall beside it was old and crumbling in places, offering handholds. I hadn't climbed anything more challenging than my daughter's jungle gym in years, but desperation is a powerful motivator. I hauled myself over the wall, dropping as quietly as possible into the courtyard below. A light was on in what appeared to be a kitchen, but I couldn't see anyone inside. The back door was locked, but a window nearby was cracked open. I slipped inside, finding myself in a laundry room. Voices drifted from somewhere in the house, angry, urgent voices. I followed the sound, moving as silently as possible through the darkened service areas of the house. Doesn't matter what he knows, Whitman was saying. The manuscript will be dismissed as the ravings of a bitter man. No one will believe it without corroboration. And what about her? Another voice, unfamiliar. She's a liability. She's also worth millions, Whitman countered. The company shares a loan, we need her signature. I peered around a corner into what appeared to be a study, similar to Richard's but more modern. Whitman stood with his back to me, facing 2 men in expensive suits. Seated in a chair between them, her hands bound in front of her, was Eliza. Her perfect composure was gone, replaced by a mixture of fear and defiance. A bruise was forming on her cheek. I'll never sign anything, she spat. Richard kept records of everything, James. Everything. It's all going to come out. Whitman slapped her, the sound cracking through the room. Your husband was a fool who got cold feet. He was going to destroy everything we built because he suddenly found a conscience. You were smarter than that once. I loved him, Eliza said quietly. Despite everything, I loved him. And you killed him. A necessary business decision, Whitman said coldly. Just like this is. He nodded to one of the men, who produced a document. Sign the transfer papers, Eliza. Make this easy on yourself. I needed a distraction. Looking around, I spotted a heavy vase on a side table. With a silent apology to whoever it belonged to, I sent it crashing to the floor in the hallway, then pressed myself against the wall. Check that, Whitman ordered. One of the men moved toward the hallway, drawing a gun from inside his jacket. As he rounded the corner, I struck, driving my shoulder into his midsection and sending us both sprawling. The gun clattered across the floor. We grappled, but he was trained for this and I wasn't. He flipped me onto my back, his hands closing around my throat. Spots danced in my vision as I fought for breath. Then suddenly, the pressure was gone. The man slumped forward, revealing Eliza standing behind him, the heavy base of a lamp in her hands. She'd managed to free herself. Daniel, she gasped. You came. Before I could respond, a shot rang out. Eliza cried out, clutching her arm as blood blossomed on her white sleeve. Whitman stood in the doorway, gun raised. How touching, he sneered. The widow and the editor. Richard would be so pleased. I pulled Eliza behind me, facing Whitman. It's over, James. Charles has sent the manuscript and recordings to the press. They're publishing everything at 9 p.m. Uncertainty flickered across Whitman's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your phone. It's probably already hitting the news. Whitman's free hand moved to his pocket, but he kept the gun trained on us. As he glanced at his phone screen, I saw his face drain of color. This is impossible. Richard planned for everything, Eliza said, her voice steady despite her injury. He knew what you were capable of. The second man appeared behind Whitman, his expression urgent. We need to go. Now. Whitman's eyes darted between us and the door, calculation clear in his gaze. For a moment, I thought he might shoot us both. Then sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. This isn't over, he snarled, backing toward the door. You have no idea what you've done. Then they were gone, footsteps pounding down the hallway toward what I assumed was a garage or back exit. I turned to Eliza, examining her wound. The bullet had grazed her upper arm, painful but not life-threatening. We need to get you to a hospital, I said, tearing a strip from my shirt to bind the wound. Not yet, she insisted. There's something I need to tell you first. Her gray eyes locked with mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite name. I meant what I said last night. I have liked you since we met. Richard knew it, it's why he was so hard on you. Eliza, this isn't the time. It might be the only time, she cut me off. Richard and I, our marriage wasn't what people thought. It was a business arrangement that became something more complicated. I cared for him, but I never loved him the way. She trailed off, wincing as I tightened the makeshift bandage. The way? I prompted, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. The way I could love someone who sees me for who I really am. Not as an accessory or an asset. Her uninjured hand came up to touch my face. Someone like you. The wail of sirens grew louder, now just outside the townhouse. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. In the chaos that followed. Police statements, paramedics, the arrival of FBI agents who had apparently been building a case against Whitman for months, Eliza's words echoed in my mind. Hours later, as dawn broke over the city, I sat beside Eliza's hospital bed, watching her sleep. The doctors had treated her wound and given her something for the pain. Charles was in the waiting room, coordinating with federal agents. The news was breaking across every channel. A publishing empire built on corruption, political influence bought and sold, a murder disguised as a heart attack. And in the middle of it all, a connection I never expected to find. Eliza stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "You're still here," she murmured. "I'm still here," I confirmed, taking her hand gently. "What happens now?" It was a question with many layers. What happened with the investigation, with the publishing house, with her life now that her husband's darkest secrets were exposed? And what happened with us, a widow and a single father, brought together by circumstances neither of us could have imagined? "Now," I said, squeezing her hand, "we take it one day at a time." 6 months later, as I watch Eliza and Lily planting flowers in our small backyard garden, I still marvel at how life can change in unexpected ways. The publishing house has been restructured under new leadership. Whitman and his associates are awaiting trial. Eliza has used her inheritance to start a foundation supporting investigative journalism. And me? I'm writing again, not just editing others' words, but creating my own. A novel based on our experience, though with enough changes to protect the innocent. Eliza reads each chapter as I finish it, offering insights that make the story richer, more authentic. We're taking things slowly, mindful of the shadows we've both emerged from. But there's a lightness between us, a sense of possibility that grows stronger each day. Sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the path forward appears just when you think you've reached a dead end. As Lily's laughter mingles with Eliza's in the golden afternoon light, I'm reminded that second chances aren't just about romance. They're about finding family in the aftermath of loss, about building something new from the ruins of what came before. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful story of all. If you enjoyed this emotional journey of secrets, redemption, and unexpected love, please like and subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the heart and stir the soul. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below and join our growing community of storytellers and story lovers from around the world.